Gil, what should an applicant bring to a SCORE counseling session? What is the paperwork that they should bring initially?
Well, if it's the first counseling session that they're meeting with the counselor and it's a startup business, let's start with that. The two key things that they ought to bring is information on their credit. A credit report and a score would be helpful because frequently if you're discussing the need for financing, those elements are very key to the judgment that would go in place as to how likely it is that they could get financing through one of the SBA programs. The other thing that they need to bring is a business plan. If not a completed business plan, at least the outline of a business plan, so that the counselor has an ability to understand what is the product or service they're talking about, what are the goals they have in terms of the business, what's the expertise of the individual or individuals who are going to start the business, and the financial elements of what kind of projections have they done in terms of profitability, how long will it be before they reach break even, all of those things. Now, we're not saying they have to come with all of that information completed. It's nice if they do, but if they have the rudiments of that or an outline of that, that gives us the ability to begin to ask the questions that we've talked about and begin to understand what they're trying to do and provide the suggestions and the advice so they can continue their thought process and continue to develop their ideas.
I attended a workshop recently just to see what the SCORE procedure was. And they laid it out very nicely. It was a 2-hour session, I think it was.
Right.
And they laid it out very nicely. And I think the business plan really is very important because it allows you to set in writing what your plan is, which seems very elementary, but people say, well, it's in my head. Matter of fact, Donald Trump was just involved in a lawsuit, and they said, how much you worth? And he said, well, I have it all in my head. And I don't know if that was bought by the jury or the judge, whoever was hearing the case, and it changes. And it does change with Trump because his branding changes all the time, depending on how popular he is at the time. Depends if he got a haircut that week. I don't know, whatever the situation is.
He gets a haircut?
He does get a haircut. I guess he has to. Everybody has to get a haircut, even me. But so to set it in writing, I think, is very important. And I think it gives them a start. And I think that's a very important aspect of the SCORE situation. Do you give legal advice or accounting advice?
No, we're not professionals in that regard, and we don't maintain any list of approved accountants or lawyers. Again, we'll do what we can to help them identify a professional to help them, and give them perhaps ideas on how to go about finding that, and maybe discussing with them the appropriateness of one over the other if they've made some interviews. But that's their decision, not ours.
It's always helpful to talk to other business owners and find out who they use.
That's probably the best source.
And what you want to hear the business owner say is, you know, he or she did this and it saved me money. He or she did that and I was able to expand my business. You don't want to hear is, oh, he took my shoebox and only charged me $100.
Right.
You know, it's not about the money; it's how much money they're doing for you.
One of the other things we'd point out is if you're in the food service industry, we would be encouraging them to find an attorney or an accountant who works in that industry, who has experience and expertise in that industry, as an example of some advice we might pass on to them.
What about mentoring programs? Do you have a mentoring program where there's a follow-up with the counselors of the business?
Well, yeah, mentoring, I think, is really an extension of the initial counseling process where the counselor and the entrepreneur have gotten together. There's some rapport. They've developed a business plan. Now we're following the various steps of the plan. And so out of the initial counseling process becomes a stronger relationship that's deeper. And so it can easily evolve into mentoring where the counselor becomes increasingly involved in the business goals of the entrepreneur, perhaps has some networking contacts that can be of assistance or can develop resources that are outside of the normal realm to help the business. So it can evolve, and I think many counselors would really find that very rewarding and would work to try to develop that if the client finds that valuable. Which
is one of the reasons why the SCORE volunteers get involved with SCORE in the first place.
I think so. I mean, that would be, from my personal perspective, would be just the reward of watching an individual become successful or more successful because of our efforts.
It was funny, when I was at this workshop earlier this week, one of the things that they do is they go around and ask everybody what the name is and what business is. And I saw every one of the counselors just totally perked up, and they were just so involved and interested in what the businesses were, and they would ask more questions. And it was just very interesting to see that it's in their blood, it seems.
Well, yeah, many of us are entrepreneurs. Some are corporate executives, but I think, at least from my perspective, I'm just amazed at the creativity that's out there. And even though we're in a tough economic time, that generates people ideas, and they follow their dreams. They follow hobbies that they've done. They have some offshoot of what they've been doing. They found a way to perhaps start a business. The creativity is really fabulous, and the opportunities, I think, are there for the people, right types of people who ought to be in business for themselves. Not everybody should, but for the type of individual who will be successful as an entrepreneur, it's a very creative time.
Absolutely. We've gotten the counseling, we've got the business plan, we've got all the paperwork together, so now we're applying for a loan. Explain that process as far as how much is required typically by a bank and how long the process takes.
When you make an appointment with the lender that can make the lending decision, that's a key factor. You don't want to just show up at a branch and go in and talk to the teller and say, you know, who do I talk to about a bank loan? You need to do your homework, figure out who you need to talk to. Depending on the size of the loan and depending upon the bank, different banks have different lending authorities for their employees. Some banks will send all business credit to a pool in another state where they make the credit decision. Some banks will make decisions just based on credit score. So every bank has a different
So really
approach.
the procedure has nothing to do with the SBA, it's all depending on the bank.
It's all depending on the bank.
Okay.
Small loans can get approved pretty quickly. Dispersing the loan is a little different. It depends on what you're going to do with the money. A lot of times, what a lot of people think is they're going to apply for a loan and they're going to get this big check deposited in their checking account. Well, a lot of times what happens is you get a co-payee check. The check is going to be written to you and to the vendor that's going to supply the equipment, because we want to make sure that you're really getting that equipment, that you're just not taking the money and taking a cruise.
Oh, is that right? That's good. Is there a minimum requirement as far as assets require, like a down payment, so to speak? Or?
Banks like to see people put in 20 to 30% of their own money in the business. So when you do your cash flow projections and you figure how much it's going to take to break even, whatever this magic number is in the beginning, let's just say it's $100,000, you're going to need $20,000 in cash. Now you can go shop for an $80,000 bank loan. And of course, this is rule of thumb. Every situation is different. So now with that $80,000 bank loan, a bank is going to want to know, what kind of collateral do you have to back this $80,000? You know, it would be ideal if you had $80,000 of equity in your home. The bank would take a second on your home and you're good to go. But since most people don't have that kind of collateral, that's one of the primary reasons banks come to SBA for the guarantee, is because the loan is not fully collateralized.
So it's possible that personal assets can be involved in this as collateral.
You have to personally guarantee this loan too, in addition to putting your house
That's
up.
part of the SBA procedure.
Yes, and the banks too.
Now, Eileen, would in the Community Express program, would there be an equity requirement there?
It's a small equity requirement. It's because the loans are under $25,000. There's typically on loans under 50, banks will waive collateral, and depending upon, you know, as long as you've got some cash in the bank to put into your business, that would be your injection.
Hold that thought. We're going to talk about that program. All right, we're going to take a slight break, a little break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about that. Was it a community program?
Community Express.
Community Express. Okay, very good. We will be right back. Thank you.